pick you up, never put you down. I'd hold you up close, like a star beside the moon. We could take on the world. Wish I could give you a home filled with all the ones you love. A place where you never feel alone. Somewhere you can be yourself. We can dance and swing.
I'll Be Frank was his Martha. All right. Amber Alert, Summer Moon, Utah Wells. Likely 3.5 feet tall, 40 pounds, blonde hair, shaved at the time of her disappearance, and bright blue eyes. Missing since June 15th, 2021, out of the Beech Creek community of Hawkins County, Tennessee. JodiSue Brown was Summer's neighbor at the time of her disappearance. She posted 17 videos titled Summer 1 through 16 with 2 number 11s, and this is what she said in videos 6 through 10. Summer number 6, Voldemort, aka Andy, and I'm going to call him Andy throughout this for the sake of typing. It was a lot easier, and his name is Andy. He realizes at this point, when he comes back down the road after I've been left alone with Jackie Dobbs for a few minutes, his uncle had already talked to Jackie Dobbs not too long before us, cutting and doing whatever, and he told him he was on the wrong piece and asked him to move. And I guess JD and all of them had words. His uncle left because it upset him, so we came down not long after he found Jackie Dobbs there ourselves. So then it sets Andy off again, and he leaves back and forth a few times, calling his mom, who's one of the ones on the deed with the uncle. Or whatever, I don't know. Property, I don't know, says Jodi. Jackie Dobbs is mostly arguing the whole time about how he's not going to leave. I think at one point he introduced us to his dog, which is a big thing with him. I did notice that when Andy was away, Jackie Dobbs would treat me entirely differently. There was something that was just kind of slid over. It was very strange. He would talk to me entirely differently than he would with Andy there. I was just trying to have a conversation with him, and I'm like, look, just trying to get him to be calm enough to hear me out. It kind of struck me a little bit wrong. So there was one time I did warn him about our children, and in particular about this community. The houses have been built kind of eons ago, and people I know online who asked questions about Candace's and them's. and it was much larger to right before this, and they had torn off and were going to rebuild. So that's why it's the size of it was. They were rebuilding an old piece that's been there, and we're getting there, Jodi says. So that sounded like a bunch of gibberish, I know. And I think what she's saying is those properties have been there for a really long time, and people were asking questions about Don and Candace's property, and all she was saying is it used to be a lot bigger, but they tore some of it off to rebuild. So the way it all sits, and the properties and the houses, especially with the 3 or 4 that are right there, and we can kind of see each other's bedrooms, and things face certain ways that the adults' bedrooms aren't facing the children's bedrooms. There is one particular spot that Jackie Dobbs' piece would have come up to meet right next to where my daughter's bedroom sort of was. I did warn Jackie Dobbs that if I caught him, because I'm not going to lie, he struck my stomach a little funny enough for me to tell that if I caught him in that spot after dusk doing anything but mowing, I wasn't going to ask twice. I wonder about all kinds of things, Jodi says. I don't know, she says. We get one point, and after Summer went missing, we knew he was lying to us about certain things. He didn't want to give us his name. The only way I found out his name was after the police were there. There was definitely a mask situation going on with that fella, because once we were backing out in my car and I thought he was moving by this point because he didn't have a place to park, he asked if he could park across the street, this, that, and the other thing, and we're like, nope. And there were some weird things, like I thought it was his health, she says, or he was having some breathing problems. But I realized he was sitting on the back of his blue blazer, squatted on it, bent over, and I thought he was having health or breathing problems because he's older, like not in shape problems. Then I realized he was just throwing a tantrum, and I was like, oh dear. And between Andy coming and going, Jackie Dobbs at the first point would talk to me. Well, he would ask something, whatever he wanted answered in a pretty direct and rude manner, like I was supposed to answer like that for him, like on command. Oh, like you think we're supposed to do for you, Jodi? I was trying to stay pretty quiet, but I would answer whatever it was she says. But when I asked something of him, he wouldn't respond, or would be very strange, like some sort of biblical marriage. The guy was definitely had some sort of problems with females. That's just how I feel about it personally. She says it was like some sort of biblical marriage, and the guy definitely had some sort of problems with females. Definitely some issues there, she says. She says, but after all this transpired, found out he had lied about his age, that sort of thing. When we were backing out at one point, we thought he was backing out too. The no trespassing, whatever. Instead, he was sitting on the back of the blazer thing, taking a rest for a second. Well, that was not the case. And I said, whoa, Andy, stop the car for a second. And I was in the passenger seat, and I hollered out the window, are you going to move? And Jackie Dobbs was like, no, I'm not. This is my land, or whatever. And Andy was like, whatever. So I was like, you know what? Go call the cops. Like they've said in the media, cell phone signals, that sort of thing down there, right? So Andy leaves me down there again, and I'm keeping an eye on Jackie Dobbs, and Andy goes to call the cops. At this point, I realized it was a swap really quick. He's all of a sudden like, well, can I park here? Can I park there? And Jodi says she's like, what? What is happening here? He wanted nothing to do with anything. So then he starts packing up what little he does have out, like cheap dog food, charcoal, etc. The whole back of his vehicle is full of stuff. I got pictures of him in the back of the vehicle that day, says Jodi. His plan was to squat there till they had a picture of one of the cabins, almost like I had for the cancer treatment, but really small. So this itty-bitty folder, it's just a picture of GIS data and one of the other tiny cabin shed things. But at that time, he was just planning on just tents and a little grill, dog, I don't know, starting fires in the woods, I don't know. It was weird, Jodi says. So he packs all his stuff back up with his cans of gas, and at least some of it. One of the property owners comes, Andy's person, and the cops eventually show up. By this point, Jackie Dobbs seems like he says he don't worry about it. You won't have a neighbor, cuz Andy offered to pay for it by this point several times too. And at one point, Jackie Dobbs tries to show the cop the GIS data too, and even the cop was like, you know, the giant survey map, and the cop basically tells him these people have owned the property for X amount of like 200 years. I'm pretty sure they know where the property lines are. Anyway, Jodi says, so Jackie Dobbs not giving his name, I don't think anyone really asks for it. Then all of a sudden, he tells the information of some sort of vet in Germany at some time, which didn't really add up with the age he gave us. And he never says that to the cop or anything. And that usually kind of is the first thing. I mean, it's kind of a thing, right? I'm a vet, right? It's one of those things we all know. But I noticed he never mentioned that, she says. JD kind of wanders off to himself and really starts packing everything the rest of the way up. Then it seems like, I don't know, he's going to find somewhere else, whatever. Then all of a sudden, he becomes sweet as pie and mentions something about the wife. I heard it like, the wife stabbed me. I don't know. I thought it was a little bizarre. I was standing off talking to the pseudo mother-in-law person. So at this point, Jackie Dobbs had even mentioned for him it was selling, etc. But then Andy asks, hey, bud, can I get your number before you take off? And Jackie Dobbs' back is turned at that point to everybody, and he just screams in an angry tone, why do you need that? Even that cops stopped and were like, you just told him you were selling. How was he supposed to keep in contact with you? That's how JD's name was sort of learned, the first anyways. The rest was in a file that accidentally caught my eyesight, Jodi says. The number was exchanged. He says he didn't have anywhere to go. He asked for hotel recommendations where he can take a dog. Then at one point he had heard, and this was a little scattered, but at one point there, right before, somewhere between him giving the GIS data and the survey thing, it seemed like the cop was like, oh, civil court. And when Jackie Dobbs heard that, he got excited that he could squat there until court, basically, Jodi says, which she was assuming that he thought that. But then I was like, he can't cut through lights and things to get in there. And the officers were like, oh, you can't do that. I'm going to need you to come back out of there. So at this point, Jackie Dobbs knew he was going to have to leave because Jackie Dobbs was cutting through JodiSue's lights, allegedly, to get to his property. And that's the end of number 6. And then number 7. So by the end of Jackie Dobbs is pretty acquiescing, asking about hotel recommendations, sweet as pie again, pseudo mother-in-law backs out to kind of let him out, and the officer is still standing there with us, and Jackie Dobbs almost throws off the entire exhaust system trying to get out of there. There are 2 drives where JD was parked. It is considered the old driveway for this property, and it kind of curves and goes up. There's also a straight driveway, which is newer. As most people will tell you, even 4-wheel drives have a problem getting up this thing. When he backs out of this curvy one of the concrete, when he backs out the curvy one, the concrete from the roadway comes down, and he just about rips off the exhaust. JD struck us all so wrong that later that night, we went looking at all the hotels we had recommended all the way out to Baileyton and Greenville. Since we didn't get to see his vehicle to see if he was there where he was supposed to be, and he wasn't at any of those places, so we're coming back to Beech Creek, and we check every hollow, and he's nowhere, never could find him. So we just let it go, and we went home. It's on our minds for at least a few hours. That's the big topic of discussion for everyone in Beech Creek. I honestly think I had done a video or two that day. I don't recall if they're open or not, but if they are, they're there, and they're just hours before Summer goes missing. So anyway, that was at least most of the interaction with Jackie Dobbs. The guy was a little off. The only vehicle I saw parked there that day was the blue Trailblazer. The next day, as you all have seen and heard, things started changing, which we first took to be rumor, and I still, have questions about things, even for who we were up close and personal with the situations and had visual on all of this for the duration. All of these things, like I said, definitely came together to create this perfect storm that even 2.5 weeks before, well, because by this point, I just want to let you know the tree cutters, they were there. Jackie Dobbs was happening, property sales, people still showing up. That even happened quite a bit even after Jackie Dobbs left. Because after that, we haven't seen Jackie Dobbs again. At least I've not, says Jodi. That was just like 13 days ago that I was there. So I do know that we spoke to Jackie Dobbs. Andy did. The kids have, I believe, that, and the lawyer he contacted the conversation with that between Andy and JD's lawyer videotaped, says Jodi. And side note, that made no sense to me, that last sentence. I know that on Jackie Dobbs' Facebook, he said he was here the next day. Something about biscuits and gravy or beer and dog. And that was kind of it. But I think the lawyer wasn't talked to until like 2 days after Summer went missing, is the impression the lawyer gave on this video. Side note again, what is she talking about the lawyer? So I'm not really sure how long JD was in town after the Ben Hill Hell incident. I mean, she says, most of me agrees. I don't think he's pretty low on my list. That's all I'm saying. I think he has his own separate issues. I think he's a little off. Definitely has maybe some problems with women of some variety, some anger issues of his own. I'm not really sure. Could have just been a situation, could have been all kinds of things. But me personally, he's low on my list. So I don't know. I'm not a cop. I'm not a detective. I'm not the feds. But I know what I know, and I experienced what I experienced. It's their job to put their pieces together. Jackie Dobbs did make it seem like when I first came down there, it was over exaggeration. He lied about his age and made himself older than he was by quite a bit. Kept mentioning how he was having problems moving and falling, but then I saw an exaggeration of that at certain points. Jackie Dobbs had been down there for obviously quite a while, saw him doing whatever. He did tell us at one point that he had actually, cause Andy asked him if he had even walked the property at first, and he said, yeah, I walked it with a friend, and he used the person's name that stuck out as a realtor. Did he lie about that too? So who knows if he actually walked the property, cause I'll tell you, there were days there, and I don't know how they would get past the dogs, but they did. I still have no idea how they took pics of our property without our dogs in them, but they did. The point is, I highly doubt it. It's just another lie. That's just my opinion. It's very strange. Strange thing, but for me, he's probably one of the lowest on my list. It's just how I feel about it. And he's not wrong, and I really do enjoy his Ben Hill Hell term. I have now adopted it. I'm using it too, Jodi says. So thanks, Jackie Dobbs. Anyways, she says, I will be back in just a minute. And that concludes summer number 7. Number 8 summer. So I'm back, she says. There was something just a second ago that I knew I had accidentally left out, and I don't really recall what that was now, she says. I know that it was a very strange, perfect storm that created all of this to where Summer was even able to go missing. And like I had said, any other time we would have, I don't know how anybody would have ever pulled this off, and I still, for the life of me, do not. Even just minutes before she vanished. If anybody had asked me if I thought one of our children could be taken from there, I would have laughed. And trust me, as a mother, and as the mother of the only other girl in the hollow, and the only other children in there, in the particular road, but the only other one with a daughter, JD had struck me wrong enough to warn him about my own and all the neighborhood children and grandchildren and surrounding, but I keep an eye on mine, even in town, because around here it was pretty mild, and now we've got the big rings coming in and stuff. This place is not so used to, so it's working um well here, so they're hitting smaller towns. So she's saying the trafficking's working well there, that's why they're staying there. And they've had quite a few things happen in the past couple of years over there, including at the park that Candace happened to be at that day. There had been quite a few incidents there to where most of us had stopped going. There's a beautiful playground there, and it's also set up for special needs children. It's one of the better ones around here, but there have been pervs at it and doing crazy things that a lot of us locally in the surrounding area had stopped going. I think there was several, news pieces, but I know there was Facebook posts about it a lot and pictures of the men they caught. Either way, and at our local Walmarts, things like that, there have been a lot of incidents the past couple years picking up something places like this in a particular aren't used to, like money scams and fake plagues, stuff the city wasn't used to. It's bigger city stuff, but it's moving because it's moving here because obviously easy marks, right? Either way, I'm pretty vigilant about her, and when you see me looking away, she's over there. She has her headphones in because I've asked, because this particular topic is hard for her and it's hard for all of us. Anyway, she says, so JD happened. He hit my gut enough to, she says, warrant me saying something about my daughter and that particular spot and other things. But like I said, he's pretty low on my list. And honestly, I kind of owe the guy an apology, she says. I was wondering why it was a little strange that for once out of 26 years I was allowed to be the spokesman for this particular Andy pack, and why Andy stood up and said, I'm going to let her speak because she's done a lot of research, this, that, and the other thing. And the whole time I had been under the impression that the spiking question of the original driveway, the reason where it was because the 77 map, the way the watership works on the top of the hill where the main house is, they changed it to make it look like that spike was in the main road, but it actually wasn't. So the spike would have been in like just general grass area, okay, she says. Now, I have no idea what she's talking about right here, guys, so say in like 1800 or whatever, but the watershed from the top of the hill, the way it moved over the years, made it become one, made it look like it was actually in the original roadway. And I had asked specifically about this, thought I had made sure of that, and I was kind of, I don't know, assumptions, right? So when JD got there, I noticed it was a little strange, and I didn't know till after all this went down that it was asked the pseudo mother-in-law step back and let me speak. And I wasn't ready for her to, so I didn't say much because they're very particular about things. So I didn't really say much, she says. And it never really came up, but I did tell JD that was one thing the family would fight over. That was the thing the family would fight over. That was the only point, and that's exactly where JD had parked, was the entrance in between the two no trespassing signs to the original and main driveway. Then it was several days since the summer thing before I was kind of looked at and told nope, that it is actually on the road. So what I told JD wasn't, I don't know, I was manipulated, and I guess that way everybody else could say that they weren't. So then I checked it out with the other family members who through the past were close to the original property owners prior to, and that was most certainly the case. They said the reason the second driveway was actually built was because in that survey map in 77, it was touching. They were afraid that would become the driveway, so they built the second driveway that's now used to ensure that could not happen. Okay, so there you go. Excuse me. Me and JD, we were both just, and I think a lot of it was, falls into I think a lot of it falls into what was happening to us for years there. We didn't get to go build on that, but I did eventually get a bathroom and a septic put in. I think the reason it was such an issue about the property for everybody was the whole contamination things weren't found, especially the giant trash pile and the well and the creek being so close and whatever, because that would bring trouble. And I think that, like for years, it was part of what we had to endure there, and it was part of the control there. And I warned people that that would eventually come down the pipeline, and it didn't matter. I was used and manipulated in a way to where everybody could say, so anyway, I think I owe JD an apology. However, I also think whatever. Anyway, so that was the topic until Summer vanished. I mean, some of the last messages with I and others just in those last moments before, in the last hours before, were about the property drama and all these things. And it seems so silly now in comparison, and that's what everyone was concerned about, however, JD being there the day prior and wondering if he was going to come back and it was going to be super weird, or cops showing up or whatever, kept me on a hyper alert. I mean, like super hyper alert, like I was anyways. But after him being there and the weirdness, it kept me on. But somehow I still missed what happened next. And I still can't tell you, and I wish every day I could tell you how I missed what happened next. I wish every day I could just tell me how I missed what happened next. So anyway, I'm going to end this one here, she says. Summer number 9. The next day, the day Summer went missing, was a pretty normal day, kind of goofing at JD's expense a little because I had no clue what I had been used for, so I thought all kinds of things. Anyways, that was the high drama, right? So then we were just kind of like normal for the kids and I. Most days, health-wise, especially at that point, were not good for me. I had been off my thyroid meds and I had a really hard time with the survey lines and no help other than my oldest. So the kids and I were in the cabin, the doors open, the windows open, no TV or anything going, and for the most part, the cabin itself was pretty empty. I had a bed in there, fish tank, that type of thing, but it was a pretty good feeling day, so the AC was off, felt pretty nice, and at the time it hadn't been, and still wasn't last I knew, just a few days ago, insulated or drywall up or anything. So you could basically, it was a different angle than the house, so the sounds were different, and it was a little closer to Candace's than the house. So I'm at the head of the bed, say if you're up towards your headboard, and in the middle, I was in that area of the bed. My oldest was to my left and down a little past my knees, Indian style would be, and my daughter was to my feet to the left and closest to the cabin doors, which were just 2 or 3 feet, maybe most, from her. We were laughing, cutting up, sharing jokes. At that point, it wasn't even at Jackie Dobbs' expense, especially while Andy was not present. We were pretty loud when together. We're talkers, just they're mine. So they're kind of like pretty happy always when we're left to our own devices, just chattering like we normally do, goofing off, having a great time together. I remember there being jokes and laughter and talking over one another, and that day there hadn't been a lot of noise. Other than the woodcutters with the 2 crews and such, they cut out a little while before the next things happened. There were several points in the day where I had heard noises outside in the roadway below us, other places up and down, even with the woodcutters, and it had brought me out of the cabin to check the banks, make sure JD wasn't back doing anything crazy, and make sure roadways were clear. Then at one point, when we got closer to the minute, that I never really saw anything that day. No cars really sitting. No, not much of anything. Every time I was brought out of the cabin, my oldest would have to help me from all the stress with Jackie Dobbs and everything. Jodi says she knows it looks bad when she talks, but that is not really how it is, and it's been months, and she's still not on thyroid meds, and it's difficult just to move. I'm sure you're noticing my speech is getting worse, and as it gets later, the droop's there, she says. The pucker muscles they had to cut through, so it looks heavier, like my face is dragging, she says. So the point is, I felt pretty bad after Jackie Dobbs and the whole drama. Muscles and things were already cramped without my thyroid meds at this point. I was expecting radiation for at least the 6 or 8 weeks I had been off at that point. Anyway, I had other health conditions from radiation, heart problems and things, so it's a little difficult. My oldest had to help me out of the cabin that day with my PTSD hypervigilant state to make sure nothing happened, and while I was being nosy, there wasn't really anything abnormal that I saw or heard until there was a point in there during the day. It was after the tree cutters had stopped sawing the clears, whatever you want to call them. Somewhere around 3, they cut out. At some point after that, I hear a car door slam. Sounds like a road that faces the right-of-way and cuts through this property too, that splits this one in parts and goes back. There's another road that faces it that's named Simpson, not to be confused with another one across the main road. So I hear what I think is a car door coming from there, and that hit me as odd. I think we go out at that point, look around, and don't see anything. We ended up going back in, but somewhere in that point, I had to ask for help, and at one point, making sure I was right on this without being led or anything. But we had heard a car door, just one, never heard an engine or a car leave, even though it was quiet. We walked to the bank for quite a few minutes, and it looked like one of the survey lines was cut and one of the tires had been moved to me. My oldest was nice enough to walk the survey line and removed a branch off of it and went a little further down and was to the right and looked at the tires, and they hadn't been moved. While he was doing that, while we were on the bank, there was a car that went up Candace's driveway. Now, the angle I was at and where they were at, I still don't know why I asked, she says. She says, I know that something was wrong with it, and that is the reason I asked him, because had there not been, I wouldn't have asked at all. It was something about the color, the rotation, the way it hit the driveway. I know the sounds of Don and Candace's cars when they go out, and who all you call Grandis. I know the sounds of her vehicle too, and the way the tires spin, and I can tell without looking who it is, even going up or down, even when I'm in the house gabbing. Some reason in my head there was a flash of red going up the driveway that was wrong. It wasn't shiny, it didn't have the gloss, it wasn't right, and the traction was entirely different. The Subaru does a 2.5 thing before it switches over. This didn't do that, and it also did not complete the loop before the driveway to pull into the top where Grandis's camper was, and also it didn't stop at the top where half the internet was wrong. Anyways, it is facing the property and is not very far up the roadway, and I can tell you that the full-size Dodge truck that Andy had that's 4-wheel drive that you can pull up in front of the basement and they can't hear you inside the house, there's something about the way the hills are shaped and the way it curves. All the hills are different and they all pick up different things. So Jodi's saying you can go park a truck up there and they can't hear you inside the Wells house. You can park right outside the basement. Summer number 10. So, something about the sound that the flash of red were wrong to me. The flash wasn't glossy like that Subaru. It wasn't new. It didn't have the clear coat. Something was wrong, and that's the reason I asked my oldest, who was that? His statement not long ago, and I may let them speak for themselves if they want maybe, but not visually. Not sure about that yet. We will discuss it as a family unit. But they did consent not long ago to other PIs and things that interviewed them on tape and things to be used if. And we have all obviously been interviewed a bazillion times since day one, minute one, from every agency on earth, trust me. I believe what my oldest has told me was that, he had just seen red and assumed it was the neighbors, but I didn't think much about it at the time. Anyways, she says, we go back inside at one point for all these different moments. The reason I know the time was because I was messaging with Andy at around 4:52. I believe I would have to look back at the messages, and lately I have not looked at those messages with the things I've been going through. But I believe the time Andy had messaged to ask what I was doing or something, it was like 4:52. So somewhere around 4:42 has been my estimation since the get. Excuse me. Could have been earliest 4:30 because I know we were out on the bank for a little bit trying to figure out what this was. So somewhere between 4:30 and 4:42, me and the children were chilling, being kind of loud, no air, no fans, running, and this scream happens. This noise I originally tried to dismiss as, but it was so different and so wrong that it immediately hits me in the gut as not right, and it shuts all three of us down cold, mid-sentence. It was that strange. And as someone who has grown up in the woods with critters of all kinds, this wasn't. But I tried to, it was so strange that I immediately tried to dismiss it as something else, including a dog, which I thought was we heard one in the car door. Even though we knew at this point the woodcutters had been gone for hours, I shouldn't have dismissed this. Maybe one of Candace's dogs had gotten too close to a woodcutter and they kicked it, but it didn't seem like a dog, and there wouldn't be a straggler in there for that long, Jodi says. My kids are immediately like, it's the kids. First thing on my mind is when I hear kids is mentioned is that it's the boys. Now I know all of their sounds. Trust me, oh boy, do I, says Jodi. I might use their names because, I've known them since they were littles, and I have heard every noise you can imagine out of those three. I hear them playing every day. Candace, I'm sorry, but during radiation, when I was barfing, they drove me a little crazy. Anyway, Jodi says, I have heard any noise you can imagine out of those three, and they go down further than summer, and they ride their dirt bikes back and forth and go in places. Really, summer really doesn't. But this wasn't their noises, and I said, that's not the boys. And it didn't occur to me summer, because summer doesn't play down far enough. You can hear her when she's at the top of the bank or when they're picking, but not a lot do you hear summer, not like the boys. Oh dear. You'll hear her faintly or whatever, but she stays close to the house. Contrary to popular belief, I've never seen Summer on the road. She is not the type to. It's not, even when people look, no. Anyways, but my daughter jumps up and goes to the door of the cabin, and she's closest, and what she hears, sorry, I'm making sure her headphones are on like I said. We're all going through enough as it is. Anyways, so she gets to the cabin door first, and this was a pretty quick series of events. It was like, what is that? It's the kids. No, it isn't. Yes, it is. And she gets to the door first and says, I can still hear it. It's one of the kids. It's muffled. That day, those were her exact words. She could still hear it. I couldn't hear it at that point any longer. But she said she was the first one to the door, and she had her head out. She says she can still hear it. It's muffled like it was leaving the road, but she could still hear it. So for a little, well, it's just so weird, right? So, and I believe she said she could hear a car too, and I could not, but I was further back, and like I said, she was first to the door and he was second. But then we go out of the banks again, and we're listening and looking, and we don't hear or see anything really. We eventually go back in. Then I get ready. I start getting ready, and not long after that, because normal time for Andy to get off work, but then Andy texts and says he's going to be running behind, that he's working over, and so somewhere, I believe around 6, he was running behind quite a bit. But at one point near 6, I believe at 6:09, I'm going around the curve to start the descent down. And that's the end of video number 10. Hey, Diane. Hey, yo, mean girl. Yeah, I agree, Diane. I don't think you did either. Before I go, Summer Moon, Utah Wells, we love you, baby.
There's a steel train coming through. I would take it if I could, and I would not ride a moon because
Hey, Angela, you're welcome. What do you guys think about JodiSue Brown taking a lie detector test? I hear that there's a $40,000 award again for Summer Moon Utah Wells. And I also hear that JodiSue Brown is being offered a lie detector test. Wonder what her excuse will be not to take that. Love you, Summer. Yeah, I'd love that too. I doubt she'll take it. She said she would before, but never did. I can't remember what the reason was. Yeah. Probably because she would have had to pay for it or something. But, alright, y'all. I'm gonna go. But, Diane, always a pleasure to see you. Angela, nice to see you. She'll say it's a medical condition. Yeah, you're probably right, for real. Yo, main girl, if you're still here, I love you, babe. I'll be frank. Have a good night. Martha was his. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you guys. All right, have a good night, and don't forget, pray for Summer Moon Utah Wells. Bye.